There is a particular kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with having worked too hard. It is the exhaustion of not having stopped. Of carrying the day forward past the moment when the day was done, past the last email, past the last conversation, past the point where any further thinking about any of it produces anything other than more thinking. The body has been lying down for 30 minutes, or an hour, or longer. But some part of the mind is still at the desk. Still in the meeting. Still running the same loop of the thing that went wrong, or the thing that might go wrong, or the thing that should have been said differently, or the thing that needs to happen tomorrow, rehearsing it with the determined uselessness of an understudy practicing a scene that will never be performed. This is where you are tonight. Or somewhere close to it. And this conversation is not going to pretend otherwise. What it is going to do instead is offer you something that the mind in its current state tends to resist with considerable energy. Something that, on the surface, sounds almost insultingly simple, but that turns out, when you actually look at it carefully and take it seriously, to be one of the most philosophically substantive and most practically difficult things a human being can do. It is going to make the case, slowly, carefully, with the full seriousness that the argument deserves, that you have done enough today. Not enough in the sense of having completed everything. Not enough in the sense of having handled everything optimally or left nothing undone or been the best possible version of yourself in every situation the day presented. Enough in a different and deeper sense. Enough in the only sense that actually matters when the day is over and the work of tomorrow has not yet begun. Enough in the sense that means you can stop now. Fully stop. Without the stopping being a failure, a surrender, a giving up on something that deserves more. Without the rest being something you have to earn before you are allowed to have it. You are allowed to have it now. This is not a reward for good behavior. It is not a treat for having finished your vegetables. It is the simple, philosophically defensible, biologically necessary, morally unambiguous fact of what this hour is for, and what you deserve from it. But before we begin our philosophical case for your right to rest tonight, if these slow, unhurried reflections help you set down the weight of the day and find your way to genuine stillness, please like and subscribe to Aphelion. This helps other people who are carrying their own heavy days find their way here, to this particular quality of company in the dark. Tell me where you are right now and what kind of day it was. I find myself genuinely curious about the specific form that today's exhaustion took. There is something quietly remarkable about the fact that right now, scattered across every time zone, hundreds of people are lying in beds and on sofas and in all the improbable positions that humans find in the dark, and every single one of them has carried a day that was specifically and uniquely theirs, and every single one of them has arrived at this same hour, this same threshold between the day and whatever the night will bring. There is something like community in that. Something like solidarity in the shared weight of having been alive and present and effortful for another set of hours. You are not alone in being done for today. The whole world is done for today, in its turn, time zone by time zone, as the dark rolls westward. And now, let us make the case. The first thing to understand is that the inability to stop, the specific failure mode of the contemporary mind that keeps the meeting running in the background of the bedroom, that converts the pillow into a second desk, that treats the gap between waking and sleep as additional problem-solving time, is not a character virtue that has been taken a little too far. It is not conscientiousness in excess. It is not dedication, or commitment, or the mark of someone who takes their responsibilities seriously. It is, when examined carefully, a cognitive error. A specific, identifiable, correctable mistake about the nature of what thinking is for and what it can accomplish at this particular hour of this particular day. Here is the error in its most precise form. The mind that cannot stop at the end of the day is operating on an implicit assumption that continued engagement with the problems of the day will produce something, some insight, some resolution, some incremental progress toward the answer, that the cessation of that engagement would forfeit. That stopping means losing. That the thoughts currently looping are doing work. That if you keep at it just a little longer, something will resolve. This assumption is almost always wrong. Not sometimes wrong. Not wrong in most cases. Almost always structurally wrong, for reasons that are both neurological and philosophical, and that deserve to be understood clearly enough to be genuinely believed rather than merely acknowledged. The neurological reason first, because it is perhaps the most immediately persuasive. The kind of thinking that the late-night looping mind is doing is not creative thinking, not integrative thinking, not the kind of thinking that produces insight or resolution. It is what cognitive scientists call ruminative cognition, a specific mode of processing characterized by narrow focus, high emotional activation, repetitive cycling through the same material without producing new information, and a strong negative correlation with the quality of the decisions it purports to be preparing. Rumination is the mind running in a hamster wheel. The wheel turns. The hamster runs. No distance is covered. And the longer the wheel runs, the more depleted the hamster becomes, and the less functional its cognition will be tomorrow when the actual problems require actual thinking. This is not a metaphor designed to make you feel better about stopping. It is a description of what is happening in the brain. The regions associated with executive function, flexible thinking, and genuine problem-solving are not the regions that are active during late-night rumination. What is active is the default mode network, the brain's resting state circuitry, which is deeply involved in self-referential thought and emotional processing, combined with elevated activity in the amygdala, which is the brain's threat detection system. This combination produces a cognitive state that feels like thinking but functions like alarm. It is the mind's way of staying vigilant against threats that, at this hour and in this bed, cannot be addressed. The mind doesn't know it is in bed. Or more precisely, the part of the mind that is running the loop doesn't know. The threat detection system evolved in conditions where the threat was physical and immediate, where continued vigilance through the night could genuinely mean the difference between surviving and not surviving. It is very good at what it was designed to do. What it was not designed to do is navigate the social complexities of a professional meeting, or the emotional dynamics of a relationship conversation, or the logistical challenges of a project whose deadline is 3 weeks away. Applying it to these problems, in the middle of the night, in the absence of any ability to act on anything it produces, is like using a fire alarm to do arithmetic. The alarm is excellent. The arithmetic is not going to happen. So the first philosophical point, grounded in the science of what thinking actually is this: the thinking you are doing right now, the looping, the rehearsing, the going over it again, is not thinking in any productive sense of the word. It is vigilance that has lost its object. It is preparation for action in the total absence of any possibility of action. It is a fire alarm ringing in an empty building, and you are allowed to turn it off. Not because the things it is alarming about are unimportant. Not because tomorrow doesn't matter, or the problems aren't real, or the relationships don't deserve more attention than the day provided. But because the alarm, ringing here, now, in the dark, is not doing anything useful with the importance of those things. It is consuming the resources that those things actually need, the deep sleep, the neurological restoration, the fresh perspective that only genuine rest produces, and it is consuming them in the name of preparation for something it is constitutionally incapable of preparing you for. The philosopher who has thought most carefully about this specific problem, the problem of what the mind owes itself, what rest is philosophically, and what it means for a conscious being to have genuinely completed something, is not someone whose work is typically described as relevant to the question of going to sleep. But bear with the detour, because it leads somewhere immediately useful. Hannah Arendt, the German-American political philosopher who spent her career thinking about the conditions of human freedom and the structure of human activity, made a distinction in her major work that, once you hear it applied to the problem of not being able to stop, you cannot unhear. She distinguished between what she called labor, work, and action. Labor, in her account, is activity that is cyclical and never finished, the work of biological maintenance, the cooking and cleaning and sustaining of the body that, once done, immediately needs to be done again. It produces nothing permanent. It leaves no trace that lasts. It is the activity of life maintaining itself, and it has no completion, because the completion of one cycle is simply the beginning of the next. Work, by contrast, produces something durable, a table, a document, a building, an argument. Work has a beginning and an end. When the thing is made, it is made. The carpenter who has finished the chair is genuinely finished. The chair exists. The work is done. An action is something else entirely, the specifically human activity of appearing in the public world with other human beings, of beginning something whose consequences are unpredictable and whose completion is, in a certain sense, never fully within the agent's control. Now here is the application, and it is precise. Most of what contemporary people experience as work is, in Arendt's terms, actually labor. It cycles. It regenerates itself. The inbox that was empty yesterday is full today. The meeting that was concluded is replaced by the next meeting. The conversation that was resolved creates the conditions for the next conversation. There is no table to point to and say, "It is done." The work of the contemporary knowledge worker, the care worker, the person in any form of ongoing relationship or responsibility, this work is, in Arendt's sense, labor. It has no completion that is not also the seed of the next beginning. And this is the philosophical source of the specific suffering that keeps people awake, the attempt to find completion in something that is, by its nature, incompletable. The attempt to reach the end of something that does not have an end. The implicit belief that there is, somewhere ahead, a state of having finished, of having cleared the inbox and resolved all the tensions and prepared adequately for everything coming, from which rest would be not merely permissible but obviously necessary. The belief that rest is something you arrive at by completing enough, rather than something you choose in spite of the fact that completion is structurally unavailable. If this is right, and the structural argument is difficult to argue with, then waiting to stop until you feel finished is not a reasonable strategy. It is waiting for a train that does not exist on a schedule that was never published at a station that was never built. The feeling of completion, for labor in Arendt's sense, never arrives. It cannot arrive. The work regenerates itself faster than any amount of effort can deplete it. And the person waiting for the feeling of completion before they allow themselves to rest is not being diligent or responsible. They are being held hostage by a criterion that can never be met. The only alternative, the only philosophically defensible response to the incompletability of the work, is a different relationship with stopping. Not stopping because you're done. Stopping because it's time to stop. Not rest as the reward for completion. Rest as the act of acknowledging that completion isn't coming tonight, and that the things waiting to be done are better served by a mind that has genuinely rested than by a mind that has looped through the night and arrived at the next day already depleted. This is not giving up. This is understanding the actual structure of the problem clearly enough to respond to it rationally rather than reactively. The ancient Stoic philosophers, particularly Seneca, who wrote about the management of time and attention with the directness that makes most contemporary self-help literature look tentative, understood something about the nature of the day and its proper ending that the contemporary world has largely forgotten. Seneca's great anxiety, the thing he returned to again and again in his letters and his philosophical essays, was not the fear of death in the abstract. It was the fear of wasted life, of time spent not quite living, not quite present, always oriented towards some future moment when the conditions would be right and the real life could begin. He wrote, with characteristic urgency, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a good deal of it. Life is long enough, and a sufficiently generous amount has been given to us for the highest achievements if it were all well invested. But when it is wasted in heedless luxury and spent on no good activity, we are forced at last by death's final constraint to realize that it has passed away before we knew it was passing." What he was describing, the life that passes without being genuinely inhabited, is precisely what the inability to stop at the end of the day produces, one night at a time. Not the dramatic waste of years spent in empty pleasure, but the subtler and more pervasive waste of hours spent in a state that is either genuine engagement with the things that matter nor genuine rest that restores the capacity for that engagement. The half-present state of lying awake running yesterday's meeting while today's night passes unreceived. Seneca's prescription for this condition was what he called the daily examination, a practice of ending each day not by extending its activity, but by reviewing it with honest attention and then genuinely closing it. Not the examination as self-punishment, not the ledger of failures reviewed with the red pen of self-criticism, but the examination as completion. The acknowledgement that today was today, that it contained what it contained, that it is now behind you in the way that all completed things are behind you, available for learning from but no longer requiring your presence within them. He specifically identified the night as the natural container for this completion. The day has its character, its events, its weight. The night has a different character, a different purpose, a different relationship with the self. And the transition between them, genuine, deliberate, acknowledged, is not a minor organizational matter. It is, in Seneca's understanding, a practice of living honestly in time rather than bleeding endlessly from one period into the next without ever being fully in either. The transition you are attempting right now, the movement from the day's mode of consciousness to the night's, is this practice. The fact that it is difficult, that the day's material is still pressing for attention, is not evidence that you haven't done enough or that the transition is premature. It is simply evidence of how well you have been doing the day's work. The mind that was fully engaged with today is the mind that needs active assistance in stepping away from it. The difficulty of stopping is, paradoxically, a sign of the quality of the engagement that preceded it. You engaged. You showed up. You brought your attention to the things that required it. And now the attention that served you so well all day needs to be given permission to rest, not because it failed, but because it succeeded. Because it has done what the day asked of it. Because the next thing it is being asked to do is something that this particular mode of consciousness cannot accomplish. Let us be precise about what the night is actually for. Not as biology only, though the biology is remarkable and deserves its own sustained attention, but as a dimension of a complete human life. The neurologist Matthew Walker, who has spent his career studying sleep with a scientific rigor and a communicative clarity that has made his work genuinely influential beyond the academy, describes sleep not as the absence of waking but as an active state with its own specific and irreplaceable functions. Functions that cannot be performed in any other state. Functions that the waking mind cannot substitute for no matter how sophisticated or determined it becomes. Among the most important of these functions is what Walker calls memory consolidation, the process by which the hippocampus, the brain's initial storage facility for new experiences, transfers the day's learning to the neocortex for long-term storage. This transfer happens during sleep and during sleep only. The experiences of the day are not permanently encoded in their final form until you sleep. The skill you practiced today, the conversation you had, the problem you worked through, none of this is fully yours yet. It becomes yours in the sleeping. It is filed, organized, connected to prior knowledge, integrated into the structure of what you know. During the hours the conscious mind is absent. This means that the night is not the interruption of the day's learning. It is its completion. The sleeping is not the pause between the work. It is the work's final stage. And the mind that refuses to enter it fully, that keeps one foot in the waking world and the problems of the day, is not maintaining vigilance over something important. It is preventing the consolidation that makes tomorrow's engagement possible. There is a second function of sleep that is, if anything, even more relevant to the experience of lying awake with the day still running. Walker describes what happens during the REM stage of sleep, the stage characterized by rapid eye movement and vivid dreaming, as a form of emotional recalibration. During REM sleep, the brain replays emotionally significant experiences from the day, but in a neurochemical environment that is specifically different from the waking state. The stress neurochemicals, particularly norepinephrine, the brain's primary anxiety signal, are almost completely absent during REM sleep. This creates conditions in which the emotional content of the day's experiences can be processed without the activation of the threat detection system that accompanied them when they were happening. The result is what Walker calls the overnight therapy hypothesis, that the brain, during REM sleep, is literally doing the work of emotional processing, extracting the useful information from the day's difficult experiences, integrating them into the larger understanding of the self and the world, and reducing their capacity to cause distress upon subsequent recall. You wake from a night of good sleep and find that the thing that seemed overwhelming yesterday is still there, still real, still requiring attention, but its edges are softer. Its weight is less absolute. Your capacity to engage with it is greater. This is not time's healing abstractly considered. This is a specific neurological process that happened in the night, that did specific work with the material of the day, and that produced a measurably different relationship between you and that material than existed when you went to sleep. The mind that resists entering sleep is, in this light, resisting its own therapy. It is keeping the difficult material in the waking state, where the stress neurochemicals are present, where the threat detection system is active, where the only available processing mode is the ruminative loop that generates heat without light, and denying it access to the state in which it could actually be metabolized. The vigilance is protecting the wound from the medicine. This is not a small thing to understand. It changes the moral valence of the act of stopping. Choosing to sleep is not abandoning the problems. It is submitting them to the most effective processing system available. It is trusting the night to do what the night knows how to do. It is wu-wei applied to the mind's own maintenance, the non-forcing that allows the deeper intelligence to operate. You are not giving up on today's difficulties when you let sleep come. You are sending them to the better part of your brain, the part that works without your management, in the conditions most suited to doing something genuinely useful with them. You are, in the most literal sense, being a good steward of the things that matter. The philosopher who came closest to naming what genuine rest actually is, what it means for a thinking, caring, engaged human being to genuinely stop, not just to slow down but to actually exit the day's mode of being, was not a philosopher by professional designation. He was a theologian, a poet, and arguably the most honest explorer of the inner life in the German literary tradition, Rainer Maria Rilke. Rilke spent much of his adult life struggling with the specific problem we are examining, the inability to stop. He was a poet of enormous ambition and sensitivity, permanently overwhelmed by the gap between the work he felt called to do and the work he was capable of doing on any given day. He wrote letters to his friends about the exhaustion of the incomplete, the sense of being permanently in the middle of something that would never be finished, permanently in debt to a standard he could approach but never reach. And then, in his middle life, he had a period of extraordinary productivity, the period in which the Duino elegies and the sonnets to Orpheus were both composed in a matter of weeks, after years of paralysis, that he described not as the result of finally trying hard enough, but as the result of a kind of surrender that he had been resisting for years. A letting go of the part of the creative project that was driven by the ego's need to produce, to prove, to justify the time spent, and a falling back into something that had been there all along, waiting for the ego to step aside. He described this state, the state of genuine creative rest, which he understood as the precondition rather than the interruption of genuine creative work, in a letter that contains one of the most useful sentences in the entire literature on the subject of stopping. He wrote, "Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act, just once, with beauty and courage. Perhaps everything that frightens us is, in its deepest essence, something helpless that wants our love." This is not an argument. It is an image. But the image is doing philosophical work. What Rilke is pointing at is the possibility that the material we are most reluctant to stop engaging with, the things that keep us awake, the unresolved problems, the difficult emotions that the day stirred, are not threats that our continued vigilance is protecting us from. They are, in some cases, aspects of experience that are asking not for more thinking but for a different quality of relationship. Not the relationship of the problem solver to the problem, but the relationship of the person to the part of their life that is, right now, outside their control. The dragons we keep circling at midnight are rarely the ones that can be slain by more thinking. They are usually the ones whose nature requires acceptance rather than resolution. The relationship that is genuinely uncertain. The outcome that is not within our power to determine. The aspect of the self that is not going to become different from what it is through another hour of examining it. The things, in other words, for which the appropriate response is not more engagement but the particular courage of letting them be what they are, for tonight, while the night does with them what the night knows how to do. This is what the German language thinkers call Gelassenheit, a word that has no clean English translation, but that captures something between letting go, releasement, and the radical allowing of things to be as they are. Meister Eckhart, the medieval German mystic who coined the term, used it to describe the spiritual act of releasing the ego's grip on outcomes, of relinquishing the need to manage and control and determine the shape of what happens. Heidegger returned to the concept in the 20th century to describe a fundamental shift in the human relationship to technology and to the will to dominate. A shift toward a different kind of thinking, one that is receiving rather than imposing, open rather than controlling. For our purposes, Gelassenheit names the specific act that tonight requires. Not a resignation. Not a giving up. Not the indifference of someone who has decided nothing matters. But the active, chosen, philosophically grounded release of the grip that the day has on the self that is trying to end it. The willingness, genuine, not merely performed, to let today be what it was, to let the unfinished be unfinished for now, to let the problems retain their weight without requiring that weight to be resolved before permission to rest is granted. This is harder than it sounds. Not because the concept is complex, but because the grip of the day is strong. It is strong because caring is strong. Because the things that won't let you go are, in most cases, the things you genuinely care about. The work, the people, the obligations, these are not trivial. The mind that cannot release them is not neurotic, or weak, or insufficiently evolved. It is a mind that has been present, that has engaged, that has given its genuine attention to things that deserved it. The inability to stop is, in this sense, the shadow side of the same quality that makes you good at what you do. But caring about something does not require being in continuous active contact with it. A parent does not stop caring for a child when the child is asleep. They are not neglecting the child by sleeping themselves. The care continues through the rest. In fact, the rest is part of the care. The sane parent who cannot function without sleep cannot effectively parent without sleep. The rested version of the caring person is a better version of the caring person. The sleep is not time stolen from the caring. It is the condition that sustains it. Everything you are most committed to, everything that is keeping part of your mind at the desk when the rest of you is in bed, is better served by the version of you that exists on the other side of genuine sleep than by the version that has spent the night looping. The work will be better. The relationships will be better. The judgment will be clearer. The patience will be greater. The capacity for genuine presence, for actually being there with the people and the problems rather than just physically occupying space near them while the mind runs elsewhere, will be deeper. You owe the things you care about your best self. Your best self is not available right now. It is available tomorrow, after the night has done what the night does. And you are keeping it from the work it needs to do by refusing to give it the conditions it needs to do that work. There is a concept in positive psychology, the field that examines what makes human beings genuinely flourish rather than merely function, called completion. Not completion in the sense of finishing every task. Completion in the psychological sense. The experience of bringing something to a meaningful close, of marking the transition between one state and another in a way that allows consciousness to genuinely move from one to the next rather than remaining suspended between them. The psychologist Bluma Zeigarnik discovered in the 1920s what became known as the Zeigarnik effect, the finding that the mind maintains active, persistent, intrusive representations of uncompleted tasks, that incomplete things occupy cognitive resources in ways that complete things do not. The to-do list that has not been checked off continues to generate background mental activation. The conversation that has not been resolved keeps surfacing. The task that is in progress but unfinished claims a portion of working memory that completed tasks do not. This effect is real and is well replicated. But what is less often discussed is the finding that accompanies it, that the Zeigarnik effect can be addressed not only by completing the task, but by making a specific, concrete plan for when and how the task will be completed. The research by Roy Baumeister and E.J. Massacampo found that making a plan, writing down the next step, committing to a specific time for addressing the incomplete thing, releases the cognitive load associated with the incompletion almost as effectively as completing the task itself. The brain, it turns out, is not keeping the task alive because it needs to be solved right now. It is keeping it alive because it needs to know it won't be forgotten. It needs the assurance that there is a plan, that the thing will be attended to, that the incompletion is acknowledged and accommodated rather than ignored. Give it that assurance, and the grip loosens. Not immediately and not completely, but measurably. This is a practical technique, not a philosophical argument. But the philosophical argument supports it. The mind that cannot stop because it is afraid of forgetting can be given permission to stop by the act of acknowledging, genuinely acknowledging, not merely noting with the intention of returning, that tomorrow exists. That the things waiting for attention tomorrow will be there tomorrow. That the plan, however rough, is in place. That the incompletion is held, not abandoned. You do not need to solve the problems tonight. You need to know they will be held until tomorrow. And they will be. They are already held, by the structure of your commitments, by the people who are relying on you, by the part of you that has been responsible today and will be responsible tomorrow. The holding does not require your active consciousness. The holding is already happening. You can release your active participation in it. This is the permission. This is what tonight's argument has been building toward. Not the permission of someone else's authority, not a voice telling you from outside that you are allowed, but the permission of genuine understanding. The permission that comes from seeing clearly why the stopping is not only acceptable but necessary. Not a rest earned by completion. Not a break granted by achievement. But the philosophically legitimate, biologically essential, morally unambiguous right of a conscious being who has been present, and engaged and responsible for another day to receive the restoration that the night offers without having to justify it first. You have done enough today. This is not a consolation. It is not a lowering of standards. It is the recognition that the standard of enoughness was never the standard of completeness, because completeness, for a human life in a complex world, is not a standard that can be met. The standard of enoughness is different. It is the standard of genuine presence, of having been there, in the day, with the people and the work, with sufficient attention and sufficient care and sufficient effort that the day received what it needed from you. Not perfect. Not infinite. But genuine. You were there today. That is what enough means. The philosopher William James, who, in addition to founding American psychology and writing the most readable philosophical prose in the history of the English language, suffered genuinely and publicly from the specific difficulty we are examining, the inability to consider himself adequate to the demands he felt life placed on him, came, late in his life, to a formulation that has the quality of hard-won truth rather than easy wisdom. He wrote that the greatest discovery of his generation was that human beings could alter their lives by altering their attitudes. This is often quoted as a cheerful motivational observation. In context, it is something considerably more serious. James spent decades in what he called the sick soul, the state of chronic insufficiency, of the self that measures itself against an infinite standard and finds itself perpetually wanting. The discovery he was describing was not that you could simply choose to feel better about yourself. It was that the standard itself was a choice. That the measure against which you were finding yourself insufficient was not delivered from outside by some objective authority. It was constructed, maintained, and applied by the same consciousness that was suffering under it. And that consciousness, with sufficient understanding of what it was doing, could choose differently. Choosing differently in this context means tonight choosing the standard of enoughness over the standard of completeness. Choosing to assess today not by whether everything was finished, because nothing is ever finished, but by whether you were present, whether you showed up, whether the people and the work and the obligations of the day received your genuine attention and care. They did. You were there. The day happened, and you were in it, and it is done. The Stoic Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who governed an empire, fought wars on multiple fronts, lost children, watched friends die, managed political conspiracies, and somehow also found the time to write the most intimate philosophical journal in Western history, ended each day with a version of exactly this examination. Not the examination of whether everything was done, not the audit of failures and insufficiencies, but the acknowledgement of what was, and the release of it into the category of the past, where it could inform future action without continuing to claim present attention. He wrote, "Do not indulge in dreams of what you have not, lest by such indulgence you miss and lose what you have. What you have, right now, is the night, the silence, the darkness, the body's genuine, insistent, entirely reasonable need to repair and restore itself. The possibility of sleep that is genuinely deep, sleep that does what only sleep can do, that produces what cannot be produced any other way, that gives you back tomorrow with the quality of presence, and judgment, and patience, and creativity that today's exhaustion cannot sustain. What you have is permission. Not conditional permission. Not permission contingent on first achieving the feeling of completion that will never arrive. Unconditional permission, grounded in the structure of what human beings are and what they need, grounded in the philosophy of what a day is and what it asks and what it cannot ask, grounded in the biology of what the night offers and what it requires. The day is behind you. It is in the past, all of it. The meeting and the conversation and the email and the decision and the moment that went well and the moment that went badly, and the thing left undone and the person left uncalled and the task left on the list. All of it is in the past now, in the category of things that cannot be changed, that can only be learned from and released and carried forward in the accumulated wisdom of a person who has lived another day and arrived, again, at this hour. You are at this hour again. The specific version of this hour that belongs to today. And this hour, like every hour of the night, belongs not to the day's work but to the self that did the day's work. To the body and the mind and the deeper layers of consciousness that have been in service all day and that are now, finally, available to receive what they have needed throughout. Receive it. Not because you deserve it in the sense of having earned a reward. Because you are a human being, which means you require it. Because the rest is not separate from the work, it is the foundation on which the work stands. Because the night is not the absence of the day, it is the condition of the day's possibility. Because you cannot be present tomorrow if you refuse to be absent tonight. Let the day be done. It is done. The problems are where they are. The people are where they are. The work is where it is. None of it is changed by your continued vigilance. None of it needs your attention before morning. All of it, every bit of it, is better served by the version of you that sleep produces than by the version that another loop of the same thought produces. This is the case. It is a good case. You don't have to believe every argument that went into it to receive the thing it was arguing for. You only have to let the arguments do their quiet work, the same work that every paragraph of every sleep video and every meditation and every gentle invitation to stop does. The work of giving the part of the mind that wants to rest permission to override, at last, the part that insists on staying at the desk. That part has done good work today. It has served you well. It can rest now. It will be needed again tomorrow, and it will be better at what it does after the rest than it would be if it ran through the night. Quiet now. Let the thinking become less pointed, less urgent. Let the problems resume their proper size, which is the size they will have in the morning, real but manageable, present but not consuming, waiting without panic for the attention they will receive when the attention has been restored. Let the body be heavy. It has earned its heaviness. It carried you through the whole of today, and the weight of that carrying is honorable. You are allowed to put it down. The darkness is generous. It is not waiting for you to prove anything. It is not conditional. It does not grade the day before granting the night. It simply offers what it has always offered, to everyone who has ever lain down in it, the unconditional hospitality of the hours in which the doing stops and the being simply continues, in the slow, patient, unsupervised, entirely trustworthy work of the sleeping mind. You have done enough. You are enough. Sleep. There is one more argument. The one that the philosophical tradition has mostly left unspoken, perhaps because it is harder to make without sounding sentimental, but that deserves to be made explicitly tonight, because it is the deepest one. The argument is about what you owe yourself. Not in the sense of self-care as a productivity strategy, not the argument that resting makes you more effective tomorrow, though that argument is true and has been made, but in a more fundamental sense. In the sense of what it means to be in right relationship with the self that has been doing all of this. There is a version of the modern work ethic, very prevalent, very normalized, very rarely examined, in which the self is understood primarily as an instrument, as the vehicle through which the work gets done, as the means to the ends of productivity, usefulness, the meeting of obligations, the service of others. In this version, the self's needs are legitimate only insofar as meeting them serves the instrument's function. You sleep because sleep improves performance. You eat because nutrition supports cognitive function. You rest because rest prevents burnout, and burnout is bad for output. This is a degraded account of the human situation, and it is worth naming clearly as degraded. Not because usefulness is unimportant. Being genuinely useful to others is one of the most reliable sources of meaning available to a human life. But because the self that is doing the being useful is not only or primarily an instrument. It is a subject. A center of experience. A consciousness that has its own texture, its own inner life, its own relationship to its own experience that is not reducible to the outputs it produces. You lying here at the end of this day are not primarily the sum of what you accomplished today. You are not the list of tasks completed or uncompleted, the emails sent or unsent, the conversations that went well or badly, the things the people around you needed that you provided or failed to provide. These things happened, and they matter. But they are not what you are. They are what you did. And you are the one who did them, the self behind the doing, the consciousness that has been present through all of it, that has felt the tiredness and the satisfaction and the frustration and the small moments of genuine connection and the longer stretches of grinding repetition that make up the texture of a day fully inhabited. That self, you, has been carrying the whole weight of today. Not just the weight of the tasks, which is the part that shows, but the weight of being present, of making decisions with incomplete information, of managing the emotional complexity of the interactions, the ones that went well and the ones that didn't, of maintaining sufficient coherence and sufficient performance to get through the day in a way that met enough of what the day required, of being someone that other people could rely on, even on the days when the capacity to be relied on felt like something running on fumes. That is not trivial work. That is the work of being a person, and it is demanding in ways that do not show on a project timeline. The philosopher Martin Buber, whose work on genuine human encounter we touched on in our exploration of solitude, made a distinction that is directly relevant here, the distinction between being a presence and performing a presence. The person who is genuinely present, who brings their actual self to their actual encounters with the world, is doing something qualitatively different from the person who is executing a performance of presence while remaining fundamentally elsewhere. And genuine presence is costly in a way that performance is not, because it requires the actual exposure of the actual self to the actual texture of what is happening. You have been present today, in whatever degree the day made possible. And presence costs. It costs in the specific currency of the self, of the inner resources that can be spent in genuine engagement, and that are not replenished by more engagement, but only by rest. By the specific kind of withdrawal from demand that the night provides. The philosopher of care ethics, Nell Noddings, Carol Gilligan, Virginia Held, developed, in the latter decades of the 20th century, a philosophical framework that made explicit something that earlier ethical traditions had largely ignored, that caring for others, as a sustained practice, requires caring for the self that does the caring. Not as a luxury, not as an afterthought, as a structural necessity of the practice of care itself. The carer who has exhausted themselves past the point of genuine presence is not caring anymore. They are going through the motions of care while the substance, the attention, the genuine responsiveness, the actual noticing of what is needed rather than the performance of noticing, has been used up. And the person being cared for, in most cases, can feel the difference. Not always consciously, but in the quality of what they receive. You cannot give what you do not have. And the kind of presence that makes the difference, in work, in relationship, in any form of genuine engagement with the world, is not produced by continued straining at the end of a depleted day. It is produced in the hours of recovery that you are currently, at this moment, in a position to begin. Rest is not the opposite of care. It is the condition of its continuation. This is the argument from what you owe to others. The rest you are taking tonight is not a withdrawal of your care from the people and the work that need it. It is the investment that makes the continuation of that care possible. It is, in the most literal and least metaphorical sense, a gift to tomorrow's people, the people who will need tomorrow's version of you. But the argument from what you owe to others, however true, still treats the rest as instrumental, still justifies it by its consequences for the work, the care, the usefulness. And I want to make the fuller argument, even if it is less immediately persuasive to minds trained to value themselves in terms of their outputs. You deserve to rest tonight because you are a person. Not because you have been a useful person, though you have been. Not because the rest will make you a more useful person, though it will. But because you are a person, and persons, conscious beings with inner lives, with the capacity for experience, with the irreducible reality of existing and feeling and caring and struggling, have a claim on the conditions that sustain them that is prior to and independent of their usefulness to anyone or anything. This claim is not unlimited. It is not absolute in ways that override all other considerations. But it is real. And it is being ignored every night by everyone who treats rest as the reward for adequate performance rather than as the basic right of a living, conscious, genuinely here and present person. You are alive. You are here. You have been here all day, bringing whatever you had to bring to whatever the day brought you. You are allowed to stop. Not as permission granted by some external authority. Not as the green light at the end of a productivity evaluation. But as the simple, foundational, non-negotiable fact that you are a person, and persons need rest, and the rest is available now, and there is no legitimate reason to continue refusing it. The ancient Greek concept of eudaimonia, the word usually translated as happiness but meaning something closer to flourishing, or the full actualization of a human being's capacities, was understood by Aristotle as requiring not just virtuous activity but the conditions that make virtuous activity sustainable. Rest. Friendship. The pleasures of the body appropriately enjoyed. The activities that restore and replenish rather than deplete. He called these the external goods, distinct from the internal virtues, but necessary to their expression. You cannot be courageous without situations that require courage, but you also cannot continue being courageous while running on empty. The virtues require a foundation of well-being, and well-being requires the conditions of genuine human flourishing, and genuine human flourishing requires sleep. This is not a concession. It is the architecture. Rest is built into the structure of what it means to live well. It is not the interruption of the good life. It is one of its essential components. You are living. Tonight is one of the nights of that living. And the night, fully received, fully inhabited in the Yin mode that the body and the mind are already moving toward, the night is not less alive than the day. It is differently alive. It is alive in the way that the roots of the tree are alive, underground and invisible and doing work that the visible canopy depends on. It is alive in the way that the fallow field is alive, gathering the capacity for the next season's growth through the apparent dormancy of this one. You are allowed to be dormant tonight. The dormancy is productive. The rest is work. The sleep is the final act of today and the first act of tomorrow. And tomorrow will come. It always comes. And when it does, you will be there, more present, more clear, more genuinely capable of meeting it than the version of you that stayed awake through the night would have been. Not perfect. Not without challenges. But genuinely there, which is the only thing the people and the work and the obligations of tomorrow actually need from you. They need you to be there. And you can only be there if you have been here first. In the dark. In the rest. In the night that is already doing its patient, invisible, extraordinarily competent work with the material of today. Let it work. Get out of the way of your own restoration. You have earned the trust. Today demonstrated it. The work was done, in the degree it could be done, with the resources that were available, by a person who was present and trying and genuinely engaged. That is what earning looks like. Not finishing everything. Not being perfect. Showing up and being there and doing what could be done with what was available. You showed up. You were there. It is done. The last thought before sleep is not required to be a beautiful thought. It is not required to be philosophical or resolved or wise. It is allowed to be the simplest possible thought. I am here. The day is over. The night is here. The rest is real and it is mine and I am receiving it. That is enough. More than enough. More than enough for tonight, which is the only tonight there is. Sleep. There is a dimension of the day's ending that the philosophical treatment has not yet addressed. The dimension of failure. Not catastrophic failure. Not the failures that make the news or change the course of things. The ordinary, daily, human failures that every person who is trying, actually trying, with genuine care and genuine effort, accumulates in the natural course of being imperfect in a world that makes many demands on the imperfect. The conversation that didn't land the way it needed to. The decision made in haste that wisdom delivered at leisure would have made differently. The person who needed more than what the available supply of patience could provide at that particular hour. The work that was done adequately when it deserved to be done well. These ordinary failures sit differently at midnight than they sit at noon. At noon, they are problems, things to be corrected, improved, apologized for, learned from. At midnight, they become indictments. The evaluating mind that, in the daytime, processes them as information and moves on, transforms them, in the dark, into evidence. Evidence of insufficiency. Evidence of the gap between who you are and who the day required you to be. This transformation, from information to indictment, is one of the mind's less helpful nighttime habits, and it deserves to be named clearly as the cognitive distortion it is. The psychologist Aaron Beck, who developed cognitive behavioral therapy through decades of clinical observation, identified this pattern, the nighttime amplification of failure, as one of the most common and most corrosive features of the ruminating mind. He noted that the same event, evaluated in a state of cognitive clarity, produces a proportionate response. Evaluated in a state of physiological depletion, low blood sugar, elevated cortisol, the late hour, produces a disproportionate response. The late night is structurally biased toward catastrophic interpretation. Not because the failures are catastrophic, but because the evaluating system is impaired. Your assessment of yourself tonight is not accurate. This is not a consolation offered to protect your feelings. It is a factual statement about the reliability of a cognitive system that is operating under conditions that systematically distort its output in the negative direction. The mind evaluating the day at midnight is not the mind that will evaluate it tomorrow morning after coffee. It is a less functional version of that mind, running on depleted resources, in a neurochemical environment biased toward threat detection, applying standards that have drifted toward the absolute in the absence of the moderating influence of daylight and human contact, and the embodied evidence of the world continuing to function despite the day's imperfections. You are not as insufficient as you seem to yourself right now. The failures are not as significant as they feel. The gap between who you were today and who you needed to be is not as large as the midnight mind reports. These are distortions produced by the hour and the state, not truth delivered by a reliable narrator. The reliable narrator wakes up tomorrow morning. Tonight's narrator is exhausted and scared and has lost perspective, and the appropriate response to an exhausted, scared narrator who has lost perspective is not to take their testimony as definitive. It is to thank them for the vigilance that, in other contexts, serves you well, and to give them rest so that they can recover the clarity that the next day's demands will require. The Talmudic tradition, the body of Jewish law and commentary that developed over more than 1,000 years of careful ethical and philosophical reflection, contains a teaching about the end of the day that is so practical and so psychologically sophisticated that it bears direct quotation. The teaching holds that before sleep each night, a person should examine their actions of the day and make a specific verbal or mental acknowledgement. If they wronged another, they acknowledge it and commit to repair. If they acted well, they acknowledge that too. And then they release the day entirely, giving it, in the tradition's language, into the hands of the night, which is to say into the hands of the processes that are larger than individual human management. The release is not optional in this teaching. It is the essential final step. Without the release, the examination is not complete. It has gathered the information but failed to do the thing that the information is for. The examination that does not end in release is a loop, not a practice. It is the Zeigarnik effect without the plan. It is the mind holding the material without the cognitive act of filing it that allows the working memory to free up. The release does not mean forgetting. It does not mean the wrongs are undone or the commitments to repair are dissolved. The Talmudic tradition is meticulous about the obligations of repair and reconciliation. These are taken very seriously, precisely because they matter. The release is not the abandonment of that seriousness. It is the recognition that the seriousness can be held by the structure of tomorrow, by the plan, by the commitment, by the person who will wake up and carry forward what needs to be carried, and does not need to be held, an active working memory, through the night. Tonight you can do this. The examination is already happening, has been happening throughout this conversation, in the way that the mind naturally reviews the day when given the structure of reflection rather than the structure of rumination. The things that need acknowledgement have been acknowledged, in whatever degree the current state of awareness makes possible. The things that need repair are known, the commitment to repair them is real, the morning will bring the capacity to act on it. The release is available. The night is here to receive it. You can hand the day over. Not because the day doesn't matter. Because it matters enough to deserve the full attention of a rested, clear, genuinely present you, and that you is not available tonight. That you is being constructed right now, in the biology of the rest that is trying to begin. Let it begin. There is a phrase that appears in various forms across several contemplative traditions, Buddhist, Christian, Sufi, Jewish, that captures the specific quality of release that genuine rest requires. The phrase, in its various translations, amounts to something like, "Not my will but thy will." Or in more secular terms, "Not my plan but the plan of what is larger than my plan." Not my control but the trust that the larger process, the biology, the night, the continuation of the world without my supervision, can be trusted to do what it does. This is not passivity. In the traditions that use it, this phrase is spoken by people who have done the maximum that was within their power, and are now releasing the outcome to what is not within their power. It is the culmination of full engagement, not the beginning of disengagement. You have done the maximum that was within your power today. The outcome, the full resolution of the open threads, the achievement of the standards that the midnight mind is holding you to, was not within your power. Not because you were insufficient, but because it never is. Because the day is always larger than what can be fully resolved within it. Because human life, conducted with genuine engagement and genuine care, always produces more open threads than any single day can close. Not your will tonight. The night's will. The body's will. The accumulated wisdom of a biological system that has been navigating the relationship between exertion and recovery for millions of years and knows, with a reliability that the anxious thinking mind cannot match, what is needed now. The body is asking for rest. The night is offering it. The philosophy has made the case for why accepting the offer is not only permissible but necessary and right. The rest of the work, the remaining arguments, the final reassurances, the further elaborations, can wait. They are not needed. You already know enough to stop. The knowing that remains after all the words is simpler than any of the words. You are here. The day is done. The night is real. The rest is yours. Take it. All of it. Without condition, without reservation, without the last-minute addition of one more loop of the thought that has already made itself known enough times tonight to be considered adequately heard. You heard it. It is heard. It can rest. And so can you. Deeply, genuinely, completely, rest. There is something that I want to say about the specific texture of what enough actually feels like. Not the philosophical argument for it, which has been made, but the lived quality of it. The phenomenology, the first-person experience, of genuinely arriving at it, even briefly, even imperfectly, on a night when it has been genuinely hard to find. Enough does not feel like completion. That is the first thing to know. If you are waiting for the feeling of having finished, of having reached the point where all the accounts are settled and all the loose ends are tied and the conscience is clear and the work is done, you will not find enough there. As we have established, that state does not exist in the form the mind imagines it. And even if it did, it would not feel like enough, because the mind habituated to striving does not recognize completion when it arrives. It simply locates the next horizon. Enough feels different. It feels like a loosening. A very slight, very quiet relaxation of something that has been held tightly without your quite noticing it was being held. It does not arrive with fanfare. It does not produce relief that is loud or dramatic. It is more like the moment when you set down a bag you have been carrying for so long that you stop noticing its weight, and then you set it down, and for a moment, before the absence registers, there is simply the absence of what was there. That space, that moment of absence before the mind rushes to fill it with the next thing, is enough. That is what it feels like. Not triumphant. Not resolved. Just this particular weight put down. The philosopher and poet David Whyte, who has spent his career at the intersection of the philosophical and the poetic, finding in poetry the precision that philosophical prose sometimes cannot achieve, wrote about this experience of threshold, of the moment at the end of something, with a specificity that I want to share in the spirit of pointing at what we are both circling. He wrote about what he calls the conversational nature of reality, the idea that life is not a monologue delivered by circumstance to the passive self, but a genuine exchange, in which the self speaks and reality responds and the self adjusts and the conversation continues. And he wrote about what it means, in that conversation, to finally be quiet. To stop speaking. To allow the silence that follows one's own contribution to be inhabited rather than immediately filled with more speech. The silence at the end of the day is that quiet. The contribution, everything you said and did and produced and attempted and failed and tried again today, has been made. And the silence that follows it is not empty. It is the space in which the response will form. The space in which the conversation continues in the mode that requires your silence rather than your speech. You have spoken today. You spoke through everything you did and said and chose and attempted. The speaking is done. The response, which will come in the form of tomorrow, in the form of what sleep produces and what the morning brings and what the people and the work and the world offer in reply to today's contribution, this response is already forming. In the silence. In the dark. In the biology of rest that has been trying to get started for the last hour. Your silence is the invitation for the response. Your rest is the space in which the conversation can continue. The stopping is not the end of the conversation. It is what allows the conversation to be a conversation rather than a monologue, your voice, your effort, your contribution, and then, the genuine, uncontrollable, unplannable response of a world that is larger than your management of it. This is what trusting the process actually means, when the phrase is stripped of its motivational poster valence and returned to its philosophical substance. Not passive optimism. Not the conviction that things will work out the way you want them to. But the genuine, difficult, evidence-based trust that the world has its own intelligence, that the processes larger than your individual effort have their own competence, and that releasing the grip of your management, at this hour, in this specific and appropriate act of rest, is not abandoning the thing you care about. It is allowing it to be in the hands of something larger and, in certain important respects, more capable than the exhausted evening mind. The seed in the ground does not manage its own germination. The wound does not direct its own healing. The dream does not plan its own content. These processes happen in the dark, beneath the surface of conscious control, with a reliability and a sophistication that the conscious mind can observe and be grateful for but cannot improve upon. Your rest is like this. The processes that will happen in the sleeping, the memory consolidation, the emotional recalibration, the cellular repair, the quiet reorganization of the self's relationship to the day's material. These are not processes you can manage better by staying awake. They are processes that are improved, directly and measurably, by your relinquishment of management. Let them happen. They are trying to happen. They have been trying to happen for a while. The only thing between you and the profound competence of your own biology is the part of the mind that has not yet accepted that its shift is over. Its shift is over. You worked hard today. The evidence is in the quality of the tiredness. There is a particular quality of exhaustion that belongs to effort genuinely expended, a weight that is different from the weight of passive fatigue or mere boredom. The person who has genuinely tried, who has genuinely engaged, who has brought their actual attention to the actual demands of the actual day, this person's tiredness is earned. It is the body's record of what was asked of it and what it gave. Your tiredness tonight is that kind of tiredness. Or if not entirely that kind, if some portion of it is the residue of the resistance itself, the exhaustion of the looping, the depletion that comes from fighting the end of the day rather than accepting it, then that is also earned, in its way. The effort of holding on is real effort. The energy spent on the continued engagement has been genuinely spent. Even the resistance to stopping has cost something. All of it. The engagement, and the resistance, and the genuine work, and the ordinary failures, and the things left undone, and the person you were today, and all of it is behind you now. On the other side of the threshold you are crossing. In the past, which is the only place where the completed day lives. Not forgotten, not dismissed, not diminished. But past. Where it belongs. Where it can inform the next thing without continuing to demand the active management of the present. The present is for rest. The present, right now, at this specific threshold of this specific night, is for nothing other than the quiet reception of what the darkness offers. The temperature of the room. The weight of what you are lying on. The sound of whatever the night sounds like where you are, whether that is the hum of a city, or the silence of a quiet street, or the indifferent noise of traffic, or the particular quality of the dark hours in your specific corner of the world. You are in your corner of the world. The world is continuing without your supervision. This is not a failure of your supervision. It is the world doing what it has always done, which is continue, regardless of the state of the human consciousness that thinks itself responsible for it. The world was here before you got up this morning. It will be here when you wake up tomorrow. In the hours between, it will do what it does, with or without your vigilance, with or without your management, with or without the running loop of the thoughts that are, even now, beginning to slow. Feel them slowing. This is what it feels like to genuinely approach enough. The thoughts do not stop. But they begin to lose their urgency. They begin to arrive with less insistence, to make their case with less compulsion, to expect less immediate response. They are still there. But they are quieter. And in the quiet, something else becomes slightly more audible, the breathing, the stillness, the quality of the dark that is specific to this room and this hour, the beginning of the state in which the body knows what to do and the mind is learning, again, to allow it. Allow it. This is the whole teaching. Not the philosophy, which has served its purpose of getting to here. Not the arguments, which have done their work. Just allow it. The rest that is available to you right now is not conditional on your feeling ready. It is not waiting for your mind to resolve the last thing, or reach the last conclusion, or achieve the last degree of peace. It is here, at whatever point you stop insisting that it shouldn't be. It comes not when you earn it but when you accept it. Accept it. You are enough. The day was enough. The effort was enough. The rest is real and it is here and it is yours. Not tomorrow. Not contingently. Now. The night is generous. Receive what it has. Sleep. One more thing. And then the words will stop, because the words have done what they can do, and what remains belongs to the silence. The one more thing is this: you will do this again tomorrow. Not the same day. The same day cannot be repeated, and the specific exhaustion and specific achievements and specific failures of today belong to today alone. But the general shape of it, the showing up, the carrying, the navigation of the gap between what was demanded and what was available, the ordinary heroism, because that is what it is, in the most accurate sense of the word, of being a person who takes their responsibilities seriously and shows up for them even on the days when the showing up costs more than there seems to be available to spend. You will do this again tomorrow. And the you that will do it will be better equipped than the you that would have faced it tonight, running on whatever would have been left after a night of unresolved looping. The difference between those two versions is exactly the difference that sleep makes, measured, replicated, documented in the neuroscience and the psychology, and the centuries of human wisdom that converge on the same point. Rest is not the interruption of the good life. It is one of its essential ingredients. So the rest you take tonight is not only for tonight. It is an act of responsibility toward tomorrow. An act of care for the people who will need tomorrow's version of you. An act of fidelity to the commitments that today was serving and that tomorrow will continue to serve, if you give tomorrow's self the conditions it needs to serve them well. This is the longest loop of the argument, the one that goes all the way around and comes back to the place where we started. You cannot continue the work you care about without rest. The rest is therefore part of the work. Receiving it tonight is not a withdrawal from your responsibilities. It is an enactment of them. You are resting for the work. You are resting for the people. You are resting because you are a person who cares about the things you do and the people in your life and the quality of the engagement you bring to both, and caring about these things, genuinely and sustainably, requires the conditions that genuine rest produces. But, and this is the final thing, the one that goes deeper than the instrumental argument, and lands in the territory where the truest permission lies, you are also resting for yourself. For the self that has been going all day, and has arrived at this moment with the full weight of that going. For the consciousness behind all the doing, the subject behind all the performance, the person, unremarkable, genuinely human, either better nor worse than the standard of ordinary human personhood, who has lived another day. Living a day is enough. Being present for it, even imperfectly, even on the days when the presence felt forced or insufficient or less than the day deserved, is enough. Caring about the things you care about and trying to serve them with what you have, this is enough. Not as the claim of a low standard but as the recognition of the actual standard, the standard of genuine effort, genuine presence, genuine human engagement with the genuine demands of a genuine life. You met that standard today, in whatever form today made possible, and the day is done. Let the body sink a little further into what it is lying on. Let the muscles that have been carrying the day's tension begin to understand that they are not needed right now. They will be needed again. They know this. But they are not needed now, and now is the only moment that is asking anything of them, and what it is asking is, release. Let the thoughts that are still present have their presence without requiring your management of them. They are thoughts. They are doing what thoughts do, which is arise and pass. They do not need to be solved or suppressed or engaged with or followed to their conclusions. They need only to be allowed to be what they are, temporary, changeable, not the same as the truth, not the same as you. You are not your thoughts about the day. You are the awareness in which those thoughts appear and within which they will, if you allow it, begin to dissolve, not into resolution but into the different mode of processing that sleep initiates. The mode in which the thinking continues without the thinker having to be present for it. The thinker can rest now. The thinking will continue in the better way, in the deeper and more competent darkness, in the processing that happens below the floor of consciousness where the real integration occurs. You are allowed to be absent from your own thoughts for a while. They will be attended to. Not by you, not consciously, but by the intelligence that knows what to do with them when the conscious mind gets out of the way. Get out of the way. The night is waiting for nothing except your permission. And permission, in this case, is simply the act of no longer withholding it. No particular feeling is required. No special state. No resolution of the outstanding uncertainty. Just the cessation of the act of refusal. The refusal was reasonable. It was the mind doing its job. The job is done. The shift is over. The next shift, the shift of the dreaming mind, the restoring body, the processing depth of genuine sleep, is already trying to clock in. Let it. Step back. Release the post. You have done enough. You have done more than enough. You have done everything the day had any right to ask of you, and some things beyond that, and you have arrived here, at this threshold, at this hour, with the full weight of the carrying still on you, and you are laying it down now. Not because you failed. Because you succeeded. Because the work was done. Because this is what success looks like, at the end of a day, a person who tried, who showed up, who carried what needed to be carried, and who is now, finally, legitimately, completely, allowed to stop. Stop now. The silence after the last word is not empty. It is the beginning of what comes next. And what comes next is the best thing available to you right now, the honest, profound, unconditional gift of your own rest. Take it. You have more than earned it. Sleep. Except there is one dimension we haven't fully explored. The dimension of what the day looked like from the outside. Not the measurable outputs, the emails, the tasks, the visible accomplishments. But the invisible labor that rarely gets counted and almost never gets acknowledged. There is a body of philosophical and sociological research, much of it developed by feminist thinkers who noticed that certain kinds of labor remained systematically invisible in the accounting of what people did with their days, around what the sociologist Arlie Hochschild called emotional labor. The term has entered popular usage, sometimes in diluted form, but its original meaning was precise: the work of managing one's own emotional state in service of a professional or relational obligation. The smile maintained when the meeting is frustrating. The patience extended when the patience has run out. The calm communicated when the internal state is anything but calm. The recognition of another person's need and the conscious effort to meet it even when your own needs are pressing. This labor is real. It is effortful. It depletes the same resources that cognitive labor depletes, and in many cases it depletes them faster, because it involves the sustained suppression or modulation of genuine emotional responses, which is among the most cognitively expensive activities available to the human nervous system. Research by James Gross on what he calls emotional regulation shows consistently that suppressing emotional expression, keeping the frustration off the face, keeping the anxiety out of the voice, producing the required warmth when warmth does not arise spontaneously, costs in measurable physiological terms. It elevates cortisol. It increases cardiovascular reactivity. It diminishes the cognitive resources available for the task that was supposedly the main event. And it is almost entirely uncounted in the typical accounting of a day's work. The project management system logs the deliverables. The calendar shows the meetings. The to-do list shows the tasks completed and uncompleted. None of these systems have a field for maintained composure in a situation that required it at significant internal costs. None of them recognized that someone needed more than I had available and gave them what they needed anyway. None of them account for, carried the anxiety of the uncertain outcome through a full day of obligations without allowing it to contaminate the quality of presence those obligations required. You did this today. In whatever form today made necessary. The specific version of emotional labor that your day required is different from anyone else's, but it was real, and it was work, and it cost something, and it deserves to be counted. Count it now. Not as a complaint, not as the fodder for resentment about not being sufficiently recognized, but as an honest accounting of what you actually did today. Not just the visible, measurable, reportable parts. The whole thing. The maintenance of the relationships. The management of the internal weather while the external performance continued. The care that was extended in directions that left less of it available for yourself. The effort to be adequate to others' needs on days when the supply felt insufficient. All of this is part of what enough means. All of this is part of the weight that the end of the day is carrying. And all of this, every part of it, is acknowledged in the full account that permission to rest is built on. The philosopher Nell Noddings argued that the ethics of care, the ethical tradition that places relationships and caring as foundational to moral life, requires what she called caring for the carer. Not as a secondary obligation, not as the afterthought to the real work of caring for others, but as a structural necessity. You cannot care indefinitely, she argued, from a position of perpetual depletion. The caring that matters, the caring that is genuinely present to the specific person in front of you rather than the performance of care as a social role, requires a foundation of genuine well-being. And genuine well-being requires, among other things, the acknowledgement of what caring costs. What caring costs is what the night is for. Not only the repair of the biological machinery, though that too, but the restoration of the inner resource from which genuine care flows. The replenishment of the attention and the patience and the warmth and the willingness to be genuinely present with another person's reality that the day of caring has spent. This is what is happening right now, in the dark, in the quiet, in the beginning of the rest that you are giving yourself permission to receive. The caring that the day asked of you is being replenished. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But in the slow, patient, biological and psychological process of genuine rest, the resource from which care flows, is being rebuilt. You will have more to give tomorrow because you are giving this to yourself tonight. The rest is generosity. It is one of the most genuine acts of care available to you right now, not care for others, but care for the self that will show up for others tomorrow. This reframing, of rest as care, of stopping as service, is not a trick. It is a genuine philosophical recasting of what the night is for, in the context of a life organized around genuine engagement with the world and genuine relationship with the people in it. The rest is not the selfish interruption of the giving. It is the condition of the giving's continuation. It is how the giving remains giving rather than becoming the exhausted performance of giving. You are caring for yourself tonight by stopping, by receiving what is available, by trusting the night to do what the night does for the self that served today's demands and will serve tomorrow's. And you are allowed to do this without guilt, without the sense that the stopping is a betrayal of the obligations, without the anxiety that the permission is somehow contingent on having performed the obligations perfectly. You are allowed to rest as a person who is in the middle of a caring life, not at the end of one. In the middle, which means more is coming, and the capacity for it needs to be rebuilt, and the rebuilding is part of the life, not an interruption of it. Rest as care. Sleep as generosity. The night as the condition of the next day's love. This is philosophically serious. It is not a consolation. It is the actual structure of a life well lived, the oscillation between giving and receiving, between engagement and restoration, between the yang of the day and the yin of the night, sustained over the course of a whole life in the way that a tree sustains itself, not by being always in leaf, but by being genuinely both, the full season of growth and the full season of rest, each enabling the other, either possible without the other. You are in the season of rest. For these hours. For this night. And the season is real, and it is right, and it is the condition of everything that grows in you and from you. Be in it. Fully. Without apology. Without the divided attention that keeps one foot in the day. With the same quality of presence that the day asked of you, but directed inward, toward the rest itself. Present to the dark. Present to the quiet. Present to the slow revolution of the body toward sleep. This is the practice. This is what enough looks like when it is genuinely inhabited rather than merely agreed to. The full presence to the rest. The willingness to be here, in this, receiving this, without the background hum of resistance and postponement. Present to the dark. Present to the quiet. Present to the weight of the body, which has been asking all day to be put down. Put it down. The day is done. The night is here. The rest is real and it is yours, and there is nothing left between you and it except the act of receiving it. Receive it now. Everything you have done today, every bit of it, the visible and the invisible, the celebrated and the uncounted, the things that went well and the things that didn't, the care you extended and the care that got used up, and the ordinary, unremarkable, genuinely sufficient effort of being present for another day of a real life. Everything has been enough. You have been enough. You are enough. And the night, with all the generosity of what is patient and what is larger than the day's accounting, agrees. Sleep then. The rest is real. The rest is yours. There is a last quality of the day's ending that I want to name. Not to extend the philosophy further, the philosophy is done, the case is made, but because this particular quality deserves to be seen clearly before it is released into the dark. The quality is, you were here today. Not performing here. Not going through the motions of here while the actual attention was elsewhere. Not surviving the day from behind the glass of distraction or numbness or the mild dissociation that sometimes accompanies the most demanding stretches of a sustained effort. You were here. You showed up. You were in the room, the actual conversation, the actual problem, the actual person. This is not automatic. It is not guaranteed by the mere fact of physical presence. There are people who are physically present in their lives for years without being genuinely here for them, without actually receiving what the people and the work and the world are offering, without being changed or moved or genuinely affected by what they encounter. Presence, genuine, costly, vulnerable presence, is a choice, made again and again throughout the day, and it costs something each time it is made. You made it today, in whatever form today allowed. And the cost is part of what you are feeling right now, in the weight and the tiredness and the specific texture of this particular exhaustion. This matters. Not as a claim for recognition, though recognition is not something you should have to go without, but as an honest accounting of what the day actually was. The day was real. You were real in it. Something genuine happened in the encounters and the work and the decisions and the small moments of actual contact with actual reality that make up the substance of a day. These things were not simulated. They were not performances of engagement designed to produce the appearance of a life. They were your life, specific, irreplaceable, unrepeatable. Today happened. You were in it. It is done. The philosopher Martin Heidegger, whose thinking about time and existence influenced much of the 20th century's most serious inquiry into what it means to be human, spoke of what he called authentic temporality, the experience of living genuinely in time rather than in the abstracted, managed, distance relationship to one's own existence that he saw as the dominant mode of modern life. To live authentically in time is to be genuinely in the moment that is passing, to let it be what it is, to receive its specific weight and texture, to allow oneself to be affected by it rather than defending against the affection. Today, in its various moments, offered you this. The specific quality of the light at some point in the day. The specific texture of a conversation that had some human weight to it. The specific feeling of a problem engaging the actual reach of your intelligence, requiring something genuinely from you. These moments were authentic temporality. They were your life happening, rather than being managed from a distance. And they are done now. They have passed into the past that is the only home of completed things. And the self that received them, that was genuinely present for them, that allowed itself to be affected, has been changed by them in ways too small to be articulate right now and too real to be dismissed. You are slightly different than you were this morning. Not dramatically, but genuinely. The day did its work on you the way days do their work on people who are present for them, accumulating, incrementally, in the direction of a life that is actually lived rather than merely survived. This is what enough ultimately means. Not the enough of the task list, though we have addressed that. The enough of a person who has been genuinely alive for another day, who has shown up for the hours that were given, who has not been perfect, because perfection in this sense is not possible and the standard is not genuine, but has been present, which is the only standard that the day actually holds you to. You have been present. The day has been received. It is done. And in the doing of it, you have done enough. Exactly and precisely and completely enough. Not more, not less, enough. The amount that one day of genuine living asks and genuinely receives. Now the night is asking something different. It is not asking you to be present in the same way. It is asking you to release the mode of presence that the day required and enter the mode of presence that the night requires. The open, receptive, surrendered quality of consciousness that allows the sleeping to begin and the dreaming to come and the restoration to proceed in the deep, competent, trustworthy darkness. The night is asking you to be present to it. And being present to the night means being willing to go where it takes you, into the dissolution of the day's vigilance, into the loosening of the categories, into the territory where the mind moves by different rules than the ones that serve the day. You can go there now. There is nothing in the way. The day has been accounted for. The enough has been established. The permission has been granted, not by me, not by any external authority, but by the logic of what you are and what you need and what this hour is for. The permission is real. The rest is available. The night is generous and patient, and already doing its work at the edges of your tiredness, in the places where the thinking is already slowing, where the urgency is already softening, where the specific and demanding shape of the day is already beginning to lose its edges in the way that all completed things eventually lose their edges in the generous blur of the rest that follows them. Let the edges blur. Let the day be what it is, behind you, complete, belonging to the past, having received what you had to give, having given what it had to give, the exchange complete, the accounting closed. And let tonight be what it is, the space that follows. The valley. the pause between words. The rest between the notes without which the music would be only noise. You are in the pause now. Let it be the pause. The next note will come in the morning. It always comes. And when it does, you will be ready, not because you managed the night perfectly or achieved the ideal rest or resolved everything that needed resolving, but because you were here, in the dark, receiving what was available, trusting what could be trusted, giving the body and the mind and the deeper self the conditions they have been waiting for all day. You have done enough today. You have done enough. You are done. And in being done, you are also, completely, legitimately, without condition or qualification, at rest. The night holds you. The dark is kind. The breath continues without your supervision. The body knows what to do. Sleep now. Deeply, and with all the fullness of having genuinely earned it, earned not through performance of sufficiency but through the simple, unremarkable, completely genuine act of having been here today, in your specific life, carrying your specific weight, present for your specific hours. You were here. That is everything. Sleep. And one last thing, because the night is long and the argument still has one strand left that was woven in at the beginning and deserves to be completed. We started with the observation that the inability to stop is not a virtue in excess but a cognitive error, a misapplication of the vigilance system to a context in which it cannot function. We have moved through philosophy and neuroscience, and the ethics of care, and the phenomenology of presence, and the structure of what human beings are and need. And all of this has been, in its way, making the same case from different angles, that you are allowed to stop. That stopping is legitimate. That the rest is real and earned and available and necessary. But there is one more angle. The one that the philosophical tradition has sometimes called the argument from the nature of time. Time, as the philosopher Henri Bergson insisted against the dominant mechanistic conception of his era, is not a container in which events are stored. It is not a line divided into equal segments that can be quantified and measured and managed. Time, as it is actually lived, Bergson called it duration, is continuous, qualitative, flowing. It does not divide neatly into past, present, and future. It is experienced as a dynamic, continuous movement in which the past is still present as memory and the future is present as anticipation, and the only access to any of it is through the constantly moving point of the present moment. The present moment, in Bergson's account, is not a geometric point with no extension. It is a thick slice of experience that includes the just past and the about to come along with the immediate now, all of it moving, all of it continuous, all of it lived as a flowing whole rather than a series of discrete instants. What does this have to do with your ability to stop tonight? It has to do with the nature of what letting the day go actually means. If time were a container, letting the day go would mean losing it, releasing it from the container of present attention into the void of what is no longer being managed. But if time is continuous duration, then the day that is passing into the past does not disappear. It is integrated into the ongoing flow of the self that lived it. It becomes part of what you are, not in the active, demanding way that it occupied your present moment while it was happening, but in the accumulated, background way that all of your lived experience is part of you. You do not lose the day by releasing it from active management. You carry it forward, as memory, as learning, as the subtle modifications to the self that every genuine day of genuine living produces. The day continues in you. It has already been integrated at the level of what you now are. The work of integration does not require your continued surveillance of the material being integrated. It requires your absence from it, your willingness to allow the process to proceed in the deeper layers of the self where the real integration occurs. This is why Bergson's insight matters here. The release of the day into the past is not a loss. It is the beginning of the form in which the day will be most useful to you, not as active content requiring management, but as integrated experience that has become part of the instrument with which you will engage with tomorrow. The meeting you had today will have shaped, in ways too subtle to articulate, the meeting you will have tomorrow. The conversation, the decision, the failure, the small success, all of it will be present in tomorrow's engagement not as active items on a mental list but as the barely perceptible refinements in judgment, and understanding and sensitivity that a person who has genuinely lived a day brings to the next one. You carry the day without carrying it consciously. This is the deepest function of sleep, the conversion of conscious, demanding content into unconscious, integrated experience. The filing, in Walker's language, the moving from working memory to long-term storage. The transformation of the day's events from items requiring active management into the slowly accumulating substance of who you are becoming. This transformation cannot happen while you are actively managing the content. It requires your release of it, your trust in the process, your willingness to let the material pass through the threshold into the processing that happens in the depths. You are at the threshold. You have been at it for a while, perhaps, resisting, perhaps, or approaching it gradually, or being brought to it by the slow accumulation of permission that this conversation has been attempting to build. Cross it now. The other side is not void. It is not loss. It is the becoming, quiet, continuous, patient, of the person who will wake tomorrow with the day's material already in them, already part of them, already working in the slow, competent, underground way that all genuine growth works. The day is becoming part of you. The sleep is how it becomes part of you fully. Let it. The threshold is here. The night is on the other side. The self that carries the day forward is waiting, not anxiously, not urgently, but with the patience of the process that knows its own timing, for the permission to proceed. You give that permission now. Not with a dramatic gesture. Not with a resolution or a conclusion or a final philosophical statement. With a simple, quiet, entirely sufficient act of stopping. The day is done. You are done. The night is real. Sleep. The room is quieter now than it was when we began. Or the quiet has become more audible, which is not the same thing, but amounts to the same experience. The same dark, the same hour, but the relationship to it is slightly different. The day is further behind you. The night is more fully here. The thoughts are still present, perhaps, but they have lost some of their insistence. Or you have gained some capacity to let them have their presence without requiring your complete attention. This is progress. Not the dramatic progress of resolution, not the arrival at the answer, but the quieter and more reliable progress of the shift itself, the gradual movement from the day's mode to the night's mode that the body and the mind are always, already making, when they are given permission not to be interrupted. You have been giving that permission. Throughout this conversation, in the listening, in the willingness to sit with these arguments and let them do what they can do, you have been giving the permission. The part of you that wanted to stop has been receiving, gradually and through the structure of the conversation, the philosophical backing it needed to override the part that insisted on continuing. The backing is there. It is real. You can use it. Not as a weapon against the continuing self, not with the force of, "I've been told I'm allowed to stop, so I must stop," but as a quiet, grounded assurance. An understanding, not merely accepted but genuinely comprehended, of why the stop is right, why the rest is warranted, why the night is what it is, and why you are what you are, and why what is being offered right now is exactly what is needed. You needed to know it was all right to stop. It is all right to stop. It is more than all right. It is the right thing. The good thing. The thing that the best version of your care for yourself and everyone else in your life asks you to do tonight. Do it now. Let the last thought be the simplest one. I was here today, and the day was enough, and I am enough, and the night is here, and the night is good. It is a good night. It is offering what only nights can offer. And you are ready to receive it. Ready, and allowed, and completely, finally at rest. Sleep. The silence after the last word is not the end. It is the beginning of what words were always pointing toward, the actual rest, happening in actual time, in an actual body, in the actual dark of an actual night. Everything that has been said has been in service of this. The philosophy, the science, the stories, the arguments, fingers, all of them, pointing at the moon of the thing itself. The moon is here. It has been here all along. You are in it now. Rest.